And welcome back, everybody. If you have ever had trouble trying to figure out what your teenager is talking about, well, you're not alone.
Boy, are you looking in my windows or what? That happens all the time. Here, how we talk, you know, if we're boomers or civics or whatever, can really turn off the millennials, the Gen Xers, the whatever, because, you know, everybody has a different name. How do we navigate the intergenerational communication minefield? Well, we turn to experts like Terri Murphy with Women's Wisdom Network. Thank God, we can always ask you. We can always go to www.womenswisdomnetwork.com and
Terri, we need the help there. We need a lot of help indeed.
Well, let's be really clear that I'm not the expert, but I love to interview the experts. And since my mother had 9 kids and then married a guy with 8, we understand a little bit about the generational gap.
I would say so.
But you know, in today's market, people are still trying to advertise like they used to, and we, for the first time in our country, we have 4 generations working side by side.
Okay,
it's never happened before. We have the civics, they're 61 years and older.
Okay.
We have the boomers, which, by the way, these are not exact years, but 42 to 60 years old, give or take.
Okay.
You've got Gen X, which is one of your largest and most emerging groups, and they're 30 to 41.
Okay.
And then from 29 years and under, you've got the millennials, the what we call Gen Ys.
Okay.
Now, here's the interesting thing about it. Each one of these groups has their own core preferences and values. So trying to sell or trying to communicate with somebody who's 61 is going to be quite diverse from somebody who's 21 years old.
Give us an example. What might strike a civic and work when marketing to a civic as opposed to a millennial?
Well, that's a really good one because they're such opposites. The civics, their core preference and value is respect. They respect experience. So the banks that have been in business for 150 years, that resonates with them. To a millennial or a Gen Y, they're like, so? And you know, like, what's in it for me? So it's not, they just don't have it. You have to earn their trust. And interestingly enough, Gen X, which is that group that came up playing Pac-Man and being more computer, they got to go outside of their core to get validation, information, authorization. So they don't necessarily trust advertising. So if you're trying to sell a product, you've got to do it a couple of different ways to actually get your market.
So is there a room, Terri, for common ground in this area when you got that many different generations, so to speak, under one roof?
Well, let's just say it this way. You know, we always used to feel one size fits all in communication. And if you're married or ever have had a marriage, or if you've ever had any kind of relationship, or even with your dog, I mean, things consistently have to be repackaged so that people get it. I mean, we have trouble with the Greyhound, which is a bus and a dog. So I mean, if you can't even get those two apart, you can imagine what we've got in general communication. But what we're trying to look at here from a business standpoint, especially when people are trying to maximize their advertising, their marketing messages, you have to resonate and use certain words that connect with these people. So for a boomer, for instance, we were all about the winnable experience. You know, you were my piece to the puzzle if we were buying real estate, for instance. In the old days, getting an experienced realtor, for instance, was the key thing. Today, they just want a good real estate experience, or a good restaurant experience, or a good vacation experience.
So what do? Go on the web and read blogs, and they get their information that way?
Social media exploded because Gen X went outside of their core to get information. That's why social media is being validated. And it's an interesting dynamic, because even your mother has a Facebook page, and I don't think you do you?
Terri,
No.
you know her quite well. She does not. She does not.
And boy, what's an 83-year-old? She's beyond civic, right?
Well,
we don't even know what we call them. Well, what about in the workplace? If you have a CEO who's a civic, and you have an accountant who's a millennial, I'm seeing all kinds of...
Here's what you need to understand, especially in hiring. And you remember when you had Dr. Green on, and he talked about how the interview process has to be different because their values are completely different. The civic expects you to be there at 8:30, wear a suit. The millennial's like, hey, if I get my job done, what are you complaining about? So there's a whole vastness, there's a gap. And so our goal, because we all coexist together, is how can we use words and understand the packaging behind each group so that we can better communicate and get effectively what we need to get. So in the workplace, in families, I mean, you know, if you've got sons that are in that age group, and boy, communicating with them is a bit different.
Boy, you can tell I've called her occasionally and gone, you won't believe what they did now.
We need some help over here. Are we doing a better job these days, though, Terri? I mean, even as diverse as these groups might be?
Well, I will tell you that the civics are impressing us. They are getting on the internet, which is a good thing,
Yeah.
because it's fast and it's ubiquitous and they don't have to leave home. What we do need, though, is there's a middle group here that must start texting, because email, for instance, is already, it's
yeah.
not in real time.
Right.
So as the world progresses to be more global in its communication, we need flexibility. We need to understand how people communicate. Not just in our own country, but other countries have different values, different types of communication modules that we need to figure out what's the best way to connect.
So does that also mean we have to be a little bit more flexible, because I
Adapt.
might feel my way is better than Mary Beth's or some other generation, but in the workforce especially, do we have to say there's got to be a kind of a give and take
You're
here?
going to see an evolution, but remember that the key to everything is adaptability and flexibility.
It sounds like the boomers and the civics really need to adapt to technology, but don't the millennials also need to adapt a little bit to the whole respect issue?
Here's
in the
what it is.
workplace?
It's more about a trust issue. And if you remember when the market's just, very, very active, nobody's stopping to figure out how things are working. It's time for us to retool. We've got a little lull. And so it's a good opportunity for us to go back and refigure it out.
Real quickly, in addition to Women's Wisdom Network, which is where you can learn about this and a myriad of other subjects, tomorrow night you are going to be speaking.
I'll be speaking at the Memphis Health event, which is going to be at the train station at 7:30.
Basically, get better Memphis in all areas, financially,
Thank you,
spatially.
Terri,
You're welcome.
for pulling us through, helping us see the light. We appreciate it.